Hello and welcome back to Half a Clue Movie Review. Welcome to week 3 of Key-November. That is Kino November, in case you forgot, since last week or the week before. This week is Ronald's pick. Ron, what is your pick for Key-November?
Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World.
Oh, you see, the thing is about Key-November is you're supposed to pick Kino. There must have been a mix-up with your pick.
Well, that's why I picked one of the most underrated masterpieces of all time.
Ooh,
or maybe not underrated, but underappreciated. I think by like it was very well rated, but that's we can get to that.
Came
later.
out in a tough time.
It did. It did.
Yeah, it kind of got overshadowed by Return of the King, right?
Yeah.
Yep. That was the thing. It was another David and Goliath story.
Okay, but for real, maybe I don't agree with it, but why? Why this pick?
It's a movie that has I feel like I've grown with it. Like it's kind of grown with me. Like I don't know. I've revisited many times. Like it's become a running joke with me and Rozie that basically it's like every year, I'll just watch this movie just cause it's hard to quantify exactly, and I'm hoping to kind of figure it out as we go through this, but it's just a movie that I love. It's just one of my favorite movies. I can watch it again and again. And I also had one of my favorite movie-going experiences. Earlier this year, they had a showing at the Academy Museum it was the best sound editing, because that's what it won. And they had it screening there, and it was just an incredible experience being in that movie theater, and just it was my first time watching it in a theater.
Must have been nice to have the theater to yourself, too.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just a bunch of other Master and Commander nerds, and we were just watching it, and it was fucking awesome. It was so cool. I love this movie.
This does feel like one that I would probably enjoy more in a theater. It's just so spectacular, and watching it on my 42-inch TV probably doesn't do it justice. But
so, Ron, do you think that you would like this movie less if you were not also a fan of boats?
I mean,
are you a boat guy?
Probably. I'm not exactly a boat guy. Okay, so here's the thing. When I was a little kid, my mom decorated my room, and she chose a nautical theme. I don't know why. Maybe there was a sale at Ross or something, but she just picked I had boat wallpaper around the top. I had a little model ship that was similar to the Surprise and everything that I thought was so cool that I used to I couldn't exactly play with it, but be around. So yeah, I like boats in a sense. I do like a lot of nautical movies. I want to watch The Bounty. That's another one I want to watch. But yeah, I guess it does help.
Well, Ron, would you like to provide some background and history about this film that you've chosen?
Oh yeah. Okay, so hold fast, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're diving
God.
into one of the most epic seafaring films ever created, Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World. This is a story of meticulous craftsmanship, incredible attention to detail, and the unique behind-the-scenes magic that brought this 19th century naval adventure to life. This ship, at the heart of it all, the HMS Surprise, was built from scratch in just 6 months. With the action constantly shifting between decks, the crew was constantly moving and shooting in tight quarters, and that was just the beginning of the challenges the filmmakers faced. The film was shot in a massive water tank, the same one that was used for the Titanic, but it wasn't just a location and that brought the sense of grandeur. Weta Workshop, fresh off of their success with the Lord of the Rings franchise, brought their mastery of bigatures to this project. Peter Weir, the director who had watched Lord of the Rings and knew he needed that same team to make Master and Commander a visual spectacle, reached out to them, brought them on board. Peter Weir also directed Truman Show and Dead Poet Society, which I've only seen Truman Show.
Same. I've only seen Truman Show.
I saw
liked
Dead Poet Society.
Yeah.
I've never seen that.
I think a high school teacher showed it.
Yeah,
one year.
that's one of the classic show during class on a day when when there's a substitute teacher. That and the other one that I got shown a lot was
Air Bud.
No, Snow Dogs and Cool Runnings.
Dude, I remember Cool Runnings.
Cool Runnings
sure.
was a big one too.
I had a teacher in high school who it was her last year teaching, and so she didn't give a shit. She showed us like every Tyler Perry movie that had come out up until that point.
Very educational.
Yeah.
Okay, so the film went on to be nominated for 10 Academy Awards, winning Best Sound Editing and Best Cinematography in 2004. But it ultimately lost out to the juggernaut of that year, which was Lord of the Rings: Return of the King, in all other categories. So whether you're a fan of the film or just fascinated by the history and craftsmanship behind it, stay tuned. We break down Master and Commander.
I do want to say the actor who plays Pippin is also in this movie.
Oh, he is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Billy
Boyd.
Boyd. Yeah.
So Billy Boyd, you were the MVP of the Academy Awards that year.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, seriously. He was
Yeah.
like the two of the highest rated films in 2004. That was his year, man.
Yeah. All downhill from there.
But yeah, no, I love this movie too because it's just draped in like so much history too. Like, and it's considered to be one of the most historically accurate films like ever made. There's no like 1-to-1. There's not exactly like, it's just inspired by everything, and it's historically authentic in many ways. And I'd also recommend, if you really, because I don't think we're not gonna get into like the actual history stuff. We're just gonna talk about the movie itself. But if you watch the History Buffs channel, they do such a great job of breaking down the legitimate history and like how everything it's inspired by it. So yeah, but yeah, you guys want to get into this? What did you guys think of it, or do you want to break it down first?
I've got a gripe I want to pick with this film. Okay. So one of the big things with this movie is 3 or 4 times throughout the film, the boat is basically completely destroyed. And then within a matter of like days or weeks, it goes back to being like perfectly fine without them having to go out and get wood, right? Like they just somehow had enough wood on deck to basically rebuild the entire ship. And like usually you would see like at least some joinery that had to be done. No, it would just go back to looking like perfectly like constructed. And that kind of annoyed me a little bit because it was, I don't know, you didn't feel the lasting damage that was being done to the ship throughout the film. I understand that you couldn't, because basically once a boat gets hit, it's going to have issues, until you take it back to the port of call in order to fix it up again. But it just kind of annoyed me a little bit, and I feel like it was hard to be invested because it felt like there was no real ongoing damage ever throughout the film, and that you couldn't see the ramifications as strongly other than through, the deaths of some of the characters.
You can a little bit. Like the mast got damaged in the first attack, right?
But
and
they kind of just
fucking
said
fell
that.
over.
Yeah, I mean,
and then like caused the crewmen to
Will
die at sea. Will yeah,
it's like, and it's not even just like some any dude, like it's a dude that like people liked, and he was like singing and like joking, everyone liked him and stuff. But I guess more to the point, like they did actually carry pretty much enough spare parts and like spare wood to like essentially rebuild the ship like under the hull. Yeah, they carried it with, especially with a ship like this where they knew that they were going to be involved in engagements and stuff. So that's why like half the crew was like, or a lot of the crew was trained to be like carpenters and stuff. So that's why you see them all like chipping away and everything. And it kind of goes into a bit of the like the British Navy in general at that point was like the peak like military force in the world at that time. And part of that was there was a little bit of sense of like vanity almost to it, where it's like they don't really need to spend the time to like carve out the lady in the front of the hull, but they do, because it's a point of pride. So I think that like them really kind of, and they do kind of show them taking time, like at least a couple days, if not weeks, like kind of rebuilding it before they're ready to like head out after them again, and after they stop in Brazil and stuff. But,
yeah, I just think that visually communicating the lasting damage, like visually throughout like the set dressing and maybe having the boat change over time, would have made it more impactful to me. Like I understand, okay, there's a reason why they were able to fix it, right? But, I would have loved to see like scars, especially like his door gets blown out, right? In his captain's quarters in like the first engagement. And then it kind of just goes back to normal, like maybe have some, scarring on the wood around the captain's quarters. I don't know. There's stuff that they could have done and do it through stuff being shown, not stuff being said, necessarily, because they were like, oh yeah, we gotta like stop, get new material for the mast, like Jason mentioned. But if they had been able to show that visually, like show like the mast being braced,
They do, actually.
No, but they don't really. I didn't see it. I probably missed it.
You picked the funniest shit to get like held up.
I know, right?
No, there's literally a scene where they show like the carpenter has like metal riggings and stuff like basically sutured around the mast that had snapped. And then he's like, do you think it's going to last? And he's like, it's the best I can do. And he's like, well, then that's good enough because that's what we're going to have to deal with. And then like one of his the officers tells him like, we can't take this through the horn, like around the horn. It's not going to last well. And then he's like, well, we can't waste time, like weeks, like, going through the Amazon and everything and finding one. It'll have to do. And then as they go, he makes the decision to also keep the sails open so they can, get more speed, even though it's going to like really fuck with the ship. And it does. And eventually it collapses over, which is one of the things I really love because it's like a lot of Jack's decisions are just compounded. Like each one leads into the other and it leads directly to the death. And then him having to make another decision to cut the lines, to kill or to let Will die and everything. And it's just like, this is essentially his fault for multiple reasons back weeks ago or maybe even months ago.
Hubris.
Yeah, it's like they could have had time to go through the jungle, or they would have maybe lost the Acheron, or they could have found it later or something. But he chose not to because he was more interested in we have to catch up. And then they find him anyway. The Acheron actually pulls a sneaky, catches them first, and then they able to sneak around and everything. But it's I don't know. I like that it shows the consequences of his actions and his choices. It
shows the consequences, but it doesn't show the time when it's leading up to the consequences very effectively, in my opinion. I might be wrong about this, but I just think that, you should have that impending doom being shown instead of you mentioned a lot of times where they talked about the issues and things like that. But, they could have had stuff with creaking, or they might have had to make a secondary repair.
Miles, I get what you want. You want to see the ship going to land looking all fucked up and stuff, and you want to really see the damage.
I want it to be very understood, with the damage throughout the film. And I want to see it when they get into their next engagement, right? That the damage is still there and it's still affecting them, instead of, a couple one-off things. Like the mask, that's the biggest, thing. But sorry for our listeners, drag racing tonight. Honestly, you can cure it for 9-10 miles around. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, do you want to go through the quick breakdown of the actual run of the movie here, and then we can move our way through?
Yeah.
Okay. So we open with the oceans are battlefields. This is the height of Napoleon's power in Europe, and the HM Surprise.
Someone should make a movie about him.
Yeah, definitely.
It's HMS, not HSM.
The HMS Surprise. I don't know. So maybe Ridley Scott should try and make a movie. He's good,
I never saw it. I've heard it's not good.
I wanted Kubrick's.
I wanted Kubrick's too, man.
Yeah.
That's the long lost white whale movie that we all wanted.
Yeah. I mean, well, yeah. And then this movie opens up with essentially its white whale narrative, where the Surprise has to hunt down the Acheron and be able to secure it and stop it from harassing British merchants and whalers and stuff. And I like the opening because the first thing you kind of see, it's quiet, it's dark. You kind of get a feeling of the ship at night, and especially because it's leading up right before the big opening battle sequence. You kind of see the cows, the ship. You see people changing the guards and stuff, going up and down the sails, and it kind of just opens up. It shows you the kind of the beauty and a lot of the cinematography pretty early on too. So then we get to the part where Mr. Hullum possibly spots the Acheron in the fog, but he's unsure of himself, which becomes a reoccurring thing. And then Mr. Calamy, his younger counterpart, decides to call to beat to quarters anyway. He's like, let's just call it just to be safe. And they are almost everyone kind of gets ready and everything. And that's when we see, or Captain Jack, who's looking out, he sees the flashes of the guns, and then woof, they're just completely blasted, broadsided by the Acheron from pretty far away. And the ship is just, kind of descends into a lot of chaos.
Very good opening. I actually really liked it. Again, bringing up the cinematography, it's fucking incredible this movie.
It's the highlight of the movie for
You're
sure.
right.
It
It's
does
there
look
from
very
the
good.
second the movie starts, and it's just beautiful the whole time. Which again is why I would love to see this in a theater.
Yeah, the use of the mist is amazing in
Yes.
terms of like it really makes it, because when you think of the ocean, it's a broad open field where you can see everything around you, and it really narrows it down, especially
It
early
makes it
on
a
the
little
film.
claustrophobic.
Yeah, claustrophobic, which is a good thing, I think, with this, because it doesn't feel like there's a broad world around the ship. It makes the ship into the world, and that's really good at setting the stage. And then you see another ship come into this world, and it really stages the conflict very well, and you understand from the very beginning that this is the world that they're living in. You know, this is the core conflict. Yeah.
After the broadside, they try to return fire, but not to much avail. We get to see things like, them running up the colors. We see Mr. Blankley's arm getting like punctured by his arm, like it's just by massive splinters. It was very effective. You see him just kind of like, just in like shock, is like he's got these 2-foot long jagged pieces of splinters like sticking in, which was a very common thing. That was the biggest source of like injuries and everything, was like the shrapnel and pieces of wood that are just, really tearing people up. I like that you see people like in the bowels of the ship, like plugging up the holes. Like you see dudes like, like just like getting big pieces of wood and cloth and just trying to like keep it, from sinking. And then you see the dudes just like pumping the water out constantly. And then
I felt bad for those guys. That's a shit job.
oh yeah,
They go in after the battle and they're still just fucking plugging away. It looks awful.
They probably kept that up for like a week, I would think, just like pumping the bilge.
I'm sure it was a long time.
I could live this life.
I
Easy.
think they said it was like on average, like probably like a couple days, or at least like maybe a day or two at least, of just really pumping out all the water and just trying to plug up those holes as quickly as they can.
Because even once you've got the holes like plugged, you need to let the wood kind of like gain moisture so that it fits to like the size of the board. So it's still going to be like weeping, I think they call it, for a while, like after.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
And then we get to also see Dr. Stephen Murrian. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. They call him Stephen most of the time, or just Doctor. But the surgeon, who is like in the belly of the ship, covered in blood. There's just blood all over the place. They're just pouring sand, so it's like
best
not
character
slipping.
in the movie, honestly.
He's
Yeah.
awesome. Played by
Not Jude Law. Not
No.
played by Jude Law. Played by
Paul Bettany.
Paul Bettany.
I mixed those two
like, like halfway through the movie, Blake referred to him as Jude Law. I'm like, that's not fucking Jude Law.
I
dude.
mix up Jude Law and Paul Bettany for some reason.
So once they have their rudder taken out, they have like, and their sails are all shot up and shit. They have like no choice really but to get tugged, and so they're just like rowing themselves out, like for dear life, trying to get into the fog so they can just get away. They managed to get away, but barely.
Yeah, they got their shit kicked in.
Yeah. And then I like it because it leads afterwards, like the officers are all kind of standing around and they're just like, what the fuck just happened? Like, they're just like, we got completely, like we shot him like pretty close and like it just didn't even have any effect. And then, they can't understand. They're just being like hit by this.
Because they were like top dogs for a while, right? Like
Yeah.
before this. And then all of a sudden this new like French ship comes along and just absolutely wrecks them.
Yeah.
They were definitely taken by surprise.
Yeah.
On the surprise.
I got
Yeah.
the sense that they've never had a defeat like that ever.
Yeah. And it's apparently it's inspired by, so in the book, this takes place during the War of 1812. And instead of the Acheron, it's not a French ship, it's actually an American ship, which is based off of a true American ship. I forget what it was called. I should have written it down somewhere. But it was a new innovation. Like they basically were using a type of oak that only lives in the United States. So it's like extra strong. They like layered it in a certain way, and what made it like withstand like cannon fire. So it was like, but they changed it to Americans or to the French because they thought American audiences wouldn't be able to like relate, or they'd be like, they'd struggle with the
They'd be
idea.
offended.
Yeah, they'd be like, "What? We're supposed to be rooting not for us?" And
Yeah,
it's
2
like,
years after 9/11.
yeah, yeah, that makes sense. They're probably like,
Americans can't be the bad guys.
I mean,
Yeah.
they did kind of leave in the part where it was constructed in America.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It was American construction of the boat. It was just being piloted by French guys. And then Marquis de Lafayette was actually an American privateer who was French. So, I mean, there is some crossover with that where it makes sense.
Mhm.
Yeah, the French had like assisted the Americans and stuff,
Yeah.
so there was a more of a relation there. Okay, so after they're trying to figure out what the hell happened, they show them beginning to repair the ship. They're like, patching it up. You see dudes just
Sea
like
miles.
chipping away.
They repaired the ship.
Were you looking at your phone again?
Yeah, I was probably looking at my phone while
Every
they were
time
repairing the
Miles
ship.
looks at the phone, someone gets their head punched off in a movie, or the ship gets repaired,
I
which he later
know,
goes on to
it's
complain
pretty
about.
bad.
Every time Miles looks at his phone, something like shattering happens.
And then we see the young boy, Blankley, the midshipman, having his arm amputated, and it's really rough. And I enjoyed that I'm glad that they included like the kids because it's like this was a true to life thing. It's like a lot of these midshipmen were young enough as like 12 or 13 years old when they would get essentially drafted or sent to the Navy to become officers. And even like other like crew members, they show a couple kids that are like even younger. They look like they're 10 years old or something because that was part of it. And you just grow up in that life and you just are, in the Navy. Congratulations.
Well, and most of those kids, I don't know, did they come from like a background where, they were sons of like lower lords and stuff like that?
The officers did, yeah. The midshipmen, I mean.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were more like the educated upper like nobles and stuff
Yeah,
like
so
that.
like the kids who were going to, join to become these officers, right? It was more of due to their social station within England at the time. It was kind of expected. And I'm assuming that most of them were not, the firstborn child of these families, but probably more second-born children and
They might have been.
the extras, in that culture.
But so after we see the surgeon, we get to also see him operating on the guy with the hold fast tattoos and his brain that got cracked open. In one of like my favorite scenes where he's just like operating out in the open because he needs the daylight.
That I saw this movie when it came out. That is the only scene I remember from this movie. Is I remember that dude having his brain operated on, and I remember watching because I was a huge fan of Lord of the Rings, and that was the moment where I was like, "Oh fuck, that's Pippin."
Those his brains, doctor. It's like, no, those are his brains. And like everyone just leans in.
That seems sanitary.
They were
Yeah,
all
they just
very
like they just hammer a coin. He just like polishes it off and he's like,
Yeah,
all
he
right.
uses a spoon and a fucking coin to get into this
Gotta
guy's
make
skull.
do.
He's like, yeah, okay, that's good enough. Dink dink.
Back then, they couldn't just turn on the TV and watch like House or something. They had to.
Man, were they missing out?
Yeah.
Okay, to be fair, if someone was doing brain surgery out in the open right now, I'd be inclined to watch.
Exactly, right? I mean, like, you can't blame him for it.
No,
I mean, you can blame the guy for doing brain surgery out in the open, but that's about it.
yeah, I mean that was the best he could do. I like that they show and they make that. It's a nice point to show that Steven isn't just like an ordinary surgeon or doctor. He's like extra smart, extra capable, particularly like intelligent, and he's also like a naturalist. And like they kind of they break down a lot of his like character very quickly.
He's a super nerd, and Russell Crowe kind of bullies him for it.
Yeah, they have like the biggest like jock nerd relationship.
Yeah.
It's also like kind of like almost like a married couple relationship. I kind
Yeah.
of love that. Where he's like, "You said you were going to take me to the Galapagos." Well, I'm sorry, we're busy. We'll go later. It's like, so
He's like, we don't have time for your dumb nerd shit right now. That's kind of how he comes off. in
you
part of
really
it.
does. So I think that's like the shattering like line when he's like, "We have no time for your hobbies, sir," and then he's like, "Oh, like how dare you?" So then we see Jack Aubrey, Captain Jack Aubrey, give a book to blatantly about Lord Nelson, who is like he's like probably one of the most like revered naval commanders in history, if not like the most. Like everyone, like, oh, he also had lost an arm. He's still alive at this point in the like story. He was
Today?
like, yeah, still today. Yeah, he's old as fuck. And yeah, he's a big deal, of course. And Aubrey or like the midshipman tries to ask him questions about it, but he's like, read the book. he kind of doesn't want to talk about him directly, which is interesting, I think. After the ship has been repaired, they're back at full speed. They decide to go after it, and this is when Will and the other guy, I forget his name, he decides to show them the model of the Phantom. Well, that's what the crew is calling it, the Acheron, and they can really kind of like see exactly how outmanned and outgunned they are, and they're like, holy crap, like this is like next generation type of shipmanship that we just don't have. They're like, how do we even like stand up to this, you know?
Also, I thought it was great about the Acheron ship design. They had a French flag that was like almost the size of the entire ship. I was like, holy crap.
Big ass French flag, yeah.
Yeah.
So then as they start, like, we get a first dinner scene soon after where they speak of Lord Nelson, which I really like because you kind of get a little like snippet of how each of the characters, like their own like thought processes as they like give little things about Nelson. The one guy's like, yeah, you're supposed to just go in and attack. The other guy's like, no, well, like, he's not a great sailor, but, you know, he's a good leader and, you know, shit like that. Like, and then we get Jack's little nugget about him and he talks about, like, he starts off with a joke, which I like. He just kind of cracks wise. And then he goes into it a bit, talking about how he's like, you know, the zeal of, you know, of honor and duty and everything, which I think shows a lot of how he sees himself, you know.
You feel like he's chasing that as well. Like he wants maybe not to be as good as Nelson, but he wants to try to live up to him.
Definitely. And then also I like then we see the doctor who kind of like he has like an offhand remark where he's like, well, you know, I guess he's an exception to the rule then, you know, that like power corrupts or something, just kind of showing his political standings where he's a little bit more of like that kind of I guess like liberal for the time, you know,
he's a man of
revolutionary.
science.
Yeah. And he doesn't have that, like, he's not a military man. That's a big thing. And then, you know, and then I think that's when he gets the lesser of two weevils joke.
Man, what a zinger.
Yeah.
awful joke.
It's great, but it also sets the, like, I think the moral framing of the movie itself, because then you get to see, like, it really is about the lesser of two evils, whether it's Britain or Aubrey or, you know, Napoleon or whatever it is. Like, it's making those decisions that, you know, can cost the lives of everybody on this ship.
Yeah.
You know?
Also, they just happened to have two weevils on that plate to set up the joke that was obviously like a rehearsed joke. The captain, I don't know.
It's a dad joke for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, but he like set it up like you know,
it's
like
a pun. You come up with a pun.
Yeah. I don't think he was like up all night the night before. Coming up with that one.
Writing a type 5 for dinner.
It felt like he was. It felt like
he
he
saw
was.
the weevils and, you know, he took his shot and he.
Okay.
Which again kind of shows that, like, a lot of times the food, the big thing was spoilage. They would have, they would deal with a lot of that. That was like a constant fear, like in the Navy, was like your food going bad.
The whole movie, every time there was food, it just looked awful.
It looked really gross.
Yeah. I like when, even like that pudding stuff that he makes later. I was like, that doesn't even look,
Dude,
good.
That looked like fucking blood. Like, I don't even know what that was.
It was just like a big brown
gelatinous fucking gross thing.
I don't know. That might just be because it's British food.
They don't got fish and chips.
Beans and toast.
It's called blood pudding, probably.
Okay, and then we get back up to the deck where we see the men, like all the other crewmen, that are like singing and dancing, led by Will, and they're just having a good time. And then Mr. Hullum decides to join in while they're singing Spanish Ladies, and it just like brings everything to a stop. Like, if you ever been like, I don't know, like you're hanging out with people and someone makes that like a terrible joke that kind of like doesn't land at all, but they keep trying to go for it, and it's like it just brings everything down. But I mean, they have no problems with immediately showing their disapproval to Mr. Hullum, and it's an interesting thing, and it kind of shows later how much they don't like him. But it's a part of it is that, like, the officers aren't supposed to, like, you know, hang out with or try to be buddies with the crew, and he's trying so hard, and it's like, and it comes off.
Yeah, and I mean, they mentioned that later through the film about how there's, like, you know, special privileges that, you know, for the lower crewmen and stuff like that, that they have privileges to be able to like drink and stuff like that, because that's, you kind of have to.
Yeah.
And you know, it's almost like I don't know how to describe it, but yeah, there's a lot of very niche, you know, rules of being on a ship and living on ship life.
And a lot of tradition.
Yeah.
So not too long after this, we get to see the Acheron is then now behind the surprise. They somehow, like, they should have been.
I love this scene.
Yeah, they should have been way ahead of them. But no, they decided, they somehow managed to slip around, and then like they're now behind them and they're tailing them, and they're like, oh shit, we are in a really bad position. We need to find a way to get out of here. And then we get to see some of Lucky Jack's like sneakiness. And he creates a diversion. He creates a little tiny ship that they build, and then they sail off into the other direction.
They leave the lights on, so they turn their lights off and turn lanterns on the mini ship and let it float away, so that they chase that instead of them.
Honestly, it's a good thing it wasn't a full moon.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. And this is also directly inspired by a real event and a real character, which is a real person. I mean,
A real character.
real character, yeah. Thomas Cochrane, aka the Sea Wolf. He had a ship called the HMS Speedy, which was like about half the size of the Surprise, but he was known for being super sneaky and a lot of shit. And he did this exact thing where he did two of the main engagements where he made a miniature like a diversion ship that was sent off into the night so that the bigger ship would get go after that instead. Yeah, distracted. And he also did a thing of disguising his ship so that he could get in close to a much larger Spanish ship in that scene, and then managed to take it over. And even though he only had 54 people on his ship and 14 guns, which for context, the Surprise has 197 people and 28 guns, and is still considered like small, he managed to capture or destroy 53 enemy vessels, which is insane.
Wow.
Yeah, the dude was a monster. So that's a lot of inspiration for Aubrey and stuff. But so we get the scene where they sneak away, and then we get, I think, a real good sense of like Jack's like seamanship that he managed to seaman where he like turns away and then manages to go right back and find exactly where they are at, and now they've turned the tables and now they're chasing after the Acheron, and it's great. I think it goes on to, I think it also kind of puts a point of his nickname. Everyone calls him Lucky Jack, but it's like whenever we see something going well for them, it's because usually it's like his skill and his ability where he really kind of thinks ahead of time and he knows how to,
he knows a couple maneuvers.
He does, yeah. He just drifted lazily to the left.
Hey, sometimes drifting lazily to the left works. Actually, in sea battles, it's really hard to aim those cannons if you think about it, because they're basically aimed straight.
I could be a captain of a ship easy.
I could see that.
I would have made a movie called Master and Commander, The Far Side of Blake.
Captain Blake?
Captain Blake. Lucky Blake.
Yeah.
I feel like Captain Blake is like actually a pretty good captain's name, but
Don't feed his ego,
you would be Captain Allen.
No, I'd be Captain Blake. I'd have that kind of relationship. Like, you can just call me Blake.
And then they mutiny.
Yeah, they would definitely mutiny.
They make me jump off into shark-infested waters.
So as they're chasing the Acheron, the Acheron is then going around the Horn, which is the southernmost tip of Chile, which is known for being one of the most dangerous sea routes in the whole world. There's giant storms, shallow waters, big rocks. It's crazy dangerous. And Jack, like we mentioned before, Jack decides to keep the sails open so that he can really catch up and everything, at risk of it destroying the ship, which essentially almost does. But also we get to see Mr. Hollum, who is supposed to go up and like help Will, as in like close up the top sail, but he freaks out. He can't do it. He can't climb up there. He's too scared. And then Will falls overboard along with the mast, and we get the most gut-wrenching scene where not only Jack but Mr. Nagel, who's like Will's best buddy, they have to cut the lines to not drag down the whole ship with it. And it's just like, it's rough.
It's tough. That's a tough scene. It's very sad.
Yeah. It's one of my favorite moments, just because like it just shows like the
hard calls.
Yeah. It's like the true harshness of like, of being a leader and a commander, and just like in how it,
being a master and commander.
Exactly. And they're on the far side of the world. And then we get, and then like, and I like that you also see the underside of the ship, who they don't even know what's going on. They just feel the whole ship like kind of listing to the left, and they're like, holy shit, we're about to die. And then it kind of pops back up to normal, and they're like cheering as this dude's like dying in the ocean. It's rough, man. And then we get to see it's sad, but a great moment. Oh yeah, so then they go down south to the Arctic cold, and again, this fun scene
when he's drowning to death.
Yeah.
And his best friend has to partake in sacrificing him for the greater good.
Well, I think the hard thing is that it's obviously it's the right decision to make, and the decision that has to be made. Like it's because there was no way to save him, no matter what. Period.
Yeah.
Like even if they hadn't cut it loose, the only thing that would happen is everybody else would have died too.
Yeah. But again, I like that it's the consequences of his other choices.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's the right decision in that moment, but the decisions that led up to it were just wrong or bad.
Yeah.
And that's the first time that you see it really hit him hard. Like that his decisions and what he's decided has so much weight and impacts people's lives. And that's, I think, what makes it very hard to be a captain.
And this is also when he starts getting like real pushback from Steven.
Yeah.
Like, hey, maybe we're taking this a little too far, bud.
Oh, and then I like
he's kind of like arrogant with him too.
Mm-hmm. And I like when he tells him like he's like, oh, like we're just like this is my duty and everything, and he's like, and I'm following orders and stuff. Or he's like, oh, you're just following orders? Like, yeah, great. That's a great line that, people have used. And he's like, well, you know what? My orders were only to follow them to Brazil. So, like, I've surpassed those orders a long time ago. And he's like, what the fuck? Like, we don't even have to be here right now? Like, Jesus. Like, it's, again, Steven surfacing as a great foil. Just, like not unafraid. The only person who can really speak, the truth to Captain Aubrey.
Yeah, and but there's also even that thing where he asks him, are you asking me as your captain or as your friend?
Yeah. And he's just like, well, and then
both.
Yeah, he's like,
But also, I think that he's in a very unique position on the ship, being that he is the ship's surgeon, that basically they could not live without. You could kind of probably make it without the captain. There would just be a first mate to replace him, but you can't make it without the ship's doctor.
Yeah, it would suck if someone just shot him for for some bullshit.
Trying to shoot an albatross or something.
Yeah.
Okay, so they decide to go to the Galapagos Islands. It makes sense. Steven is happy. Yay for Steven. He gets to put on his hiking outfit and go out. And then as they're headed there, they decide that once they finally reach the Galapagos, they spot some whalers who had gone through some trouble, and they find out that the Acheron is nearby, so they have to postpone their adventures in the Galapagos, which is crushing to Steven.
But that's also the whalers that they were looking for, right?
Yeah.
Well, because Captain Jack knew that there were whalers there, and that's how he knew that the Acheron would be there.
Yes, exactly. So it's like technically going to plan, but still, it's not, it
was going to plan a little bit faster than they were hoping.
After they get, that's when, they start arguing about more stuff. And that's again where he's like, hey, you need to they're not your hobbies. Like, we have no time for your hobbies, sir. And he's like, what? And then
it really hurt his feelings.
It really did.
I mean, he is like a man of science, and he's calling his discoveries a hobby, and it's kind of a low blow.
He's like, I would be the first naturalist, on the island. Like, it's actually a big deal. And he's like, meh. He's like, you're a little shit. I don't give a shit.
I love how Steven just mopes around for the next 10 minutes.
Yeah. But then we get the scene where the midshipman, Blankley, the guy with one arm, he gives the doctor a beetle, and he was like, I bet you could spend the whole day on the island and not find it, which foreshadows later when we see that exact moment. And he's like, oh, yeah, thanks. And then we also get a shot of the crew running gun drills, which I really like. They show them practicing, trying to get their timing right, because that was a really big deal and a very important factor for the British Navy, where they had to get like their timing and precision. They could get like fire off shots in like 90 seconds or less, which was a real thing. They constantly practiced because that was to keep the discipline and like, you know, their precision timing in order.
To me, it just seemed like a waste of ammo. Like,
I don't think they were firing actual rounds.
No, they were. Yeah, they
Well,
were.
even if they
firing
were,
actual
it's-
cannonballs.
They guess what? They carry years worth of that on there so they can practice. They take it all into account. They're not like, oh shit, I can't believe we shot off our last.
But also, the boat had gone significantly further than it was supposed to have gone at that point.
I mean, that's true.
And it
but
had been in like 2 major engagements at this point too.
I think they had one fight so far where they actually fired anyways.
Okay.
But still, it's the point is you see them actually training.
Practice.
Yeah, practice.
I wish they would have broke out into song and dance while they're doing it. Like, let's get down to business
To defeat.
the French.
Well, right after this, there's they get hit by a heat wave. There's no wind.
Oh, that's like my favorite shot of the movie, by the way, when it first cuts to like the sun beating down on the ship and you see it
just
like
so
reflected
still.
and you see it reflected in the water. I was like, that's a really cool shot. Good job, guys.
It's
Proud
always
of you.
so eerie. It's always so eerie when you see like no waves in the ocean, and it's just like it's basically it's completely still, and it just feels like wrong, right? Like it suddenly feels like they're in the middle of the desert, the Sahara or something, and they're just stranded because they just have each other, and that's pretty much it. There's not much you can do at all, really.
Like, what's scarier in the ocean, would you guys say? Like, if you were out middle of the ocean, would you be more scared with like really bad, like wavy waves that are bumping the ship around? Or would you be more scared with like just no waves, nothing, just stillness?
Probably waves.
Yeah.
Waves. Yeah, that seems fucking terrifying.
I feel like
I've watched Deadliest Catch. That shit's wild.
dude, it's crazy. Like a bunch of them died for real. on
Yeah.
it.
It's
It's crazy.
the masculine urge to be a crab fisherman in Alaska.
It's a masculine urge to join the Navy, you know. Okay, so after this, we see the crew slowly beginning to turn on Mr. Hollum, who has been a very weak, officer this whole time, right? And we see Mr. Nagel just kind of like, you know, we also see it with the hold fast guy is like kind of really feeding into this like paranoia. He's like talking about like that ghost ship. There's a devil on that ship. You know, like he's like the Lord giveth and it taketh away. Like he's just quoting Bible verses from the book of Jonah or from the verses of I don't know Bible stuff, but
I don't either. Yeah.
the Jonah part of it. Just really reflecting how like, you know, trying to say that Mr. Hollum is cursed, and the crew starts to believe that because sailors can be very superstitious, and it's a no wonder why, because it's like, you know, sometimes you have the wind, sometimes you don't, and you never know. It's like, because I didn't wear my socks that day, I don't know. You never know.
Yeah, like sports fans.
Exactly.
Well, I think it also comes down to them being in a very small world, right? You know, you're on this ship, right? And it's hard to blame external forces for what's going on when you're in a confined world or a confined space like that, right? So then you have to start looking for reasons why things are happening. Like, you know, naturally, like in society, if there's a big fire or something, right? And you're like, oh no, there's a fire going on. Like, you don't see that as a sign because the world's so big. Okay, yeah, so something caused that fire. But on a ship, if something catches on fire, right? Well, it's a little bit closer.
It's someone's fault.
Yeah.
It's somebody's fault, right?
And I mean, that's one of the
yeah.
things that we get into right after this when Mr. Nagel like shoulder checks Mr. Hollum and doesn't salute him, and Aubrey's like, arrest that man, you know, have him flogged or whatever. Like they're gonna have him whipped and everything, which leads into another argument between Jack and Steven, and in that whole thing where he's like, you know, calls him a tyrant or basically like tells him like, you know, this is an excuse, like you like, and then, you know, it really shows their like Jack's ideas of like men must be governed, you know. It's like sometimes by like nasty ideas, you know, like sometimes things get ugly, but it's just what's necessary, you know. And Steven doesn't agree with that. He feels that there could be alternatives, And maybe there could be, but I don't know. It's hard to say.
You
for
know,
real.
I don't think that there can be in a military structure like that, right? So it reminded me of the book for Starship Troopers, which is very different from the movie for those of you guys who have watched the movie. But you know, there's a scene where one guy punches an officer, and that's like one of those big no-nos is you can't hit an officer, right? And the officer is trying to cover it up and unsuccessfully because this guy has a big mouth and is pissed that the officer punched him back, right? Which is totally acceptable within their rules and regulations. So the superior guy basically is forced to hand down a judgment on you know, this cadet, and it's you know, getting lashed in a very similar way. But then the original officer, he basically like calls him to the side afterwards and talks down to him, and he's like, this is your fault, like this is your fault for letting him be able to punch you, right? You know, I've got to punish him, but that's not his fault that he's being punished. It's on you that he's being punished. And I feel like it's the same thing with this situation.
Yeah, Aubrey has a very similar conversation with
It's like the same scene.
I'm sorry. But I saw that illusion. I thought it was very close.
Very similar.
And it's, but also like Jack feels like he needs to do it specifically right now because everything is so tense on the ship, and he cannot let people start disobeying orders. This is the time where they need to be, you know, it needs to be a tightly run ship right now.
Tightly run ship, you say?
Yeah.
It needs to be immediate. It needs to happen quickly.
He needs to deal with any sort of insubordination. Otherwise, things could get out of hand fast.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a thing that has, like, there have been many cases of, like, mutinies where things like small actions begin to grow very quickly. So you can kind of see where Aubrey is, like, is, you know, he's a little scared, maybe, or at least apprehensive or nervous of the idea of this expanding beyond control.
He even, I don't know if it's this scene or it may have been a little before, like after Will's death. He asks Steven, like, hey, what's the crew's thoughts on what's going on here? Like, he's already kind of like preparing himself for maybe something's brewing down in the lower decks.
I think he says something like, men must be governed. And then Stephen is like, that's the excuses of tyrants from, like, you know, everywhere from to even Napoleon, right? It's like I'm making a direct reference being like, how are you better than the enemy, you know? And it's important because it's like, he tells him, like, you know, because basically it's like the idea of like, when is duty, you know, more important than, like, when does duty become tyranny, or like when does it usurp freedom? You know, like this whole idea of like, a lot of these men were probably drafted into this too. Like, they weren't, not that, you know, there may have been some people who like signed up, but a lot of these guys didn't really have a choice. So it's like, that's when I think he tells him, like, what did he say? He's like, you know, it's like, I'm kind of like open to the ideas of mutiny or something like that. And then he's like, hey, fucking like cut it out. Like, you know, because it's a serious thing. It's a serious issue because it's like, yeah, you know, they are being a bit tyrannical. That's the truth of it. But is it necessary? Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. To help keep these guys alive, who knows?
You know what would help with not being mutinied? Maybe not having all these old men being commanded by 12-year-olds.
Yeah.
I mean, especially towards the end of the film when they've lost a couple of the older officers.
Yeah.
It's like
little kid officers.
Yeah.
I mean, it's at the very least you could say that the dudes, those kids are,
they handled their shit.
Yeah,
there's much in the shit. There. Like, I mean, the dude, he's already lost an arm. I feel like that already gives him so much cred. Which is the thing I like too, is like you see on almost like all of the men, you see like scars, like facial scars, like, you know, like Jack's ear is like welded together through like, you know, like a healing at some point. Like another dude has his face is like slashed. Like there's a lot of like old man scarring on these dudes, and you can just tell that they've seen and been through it. Yeah, they've been through tons of battles. Like nobody here is like left unaffected, untouched. You get boarded or you're getting shot at, it's affecting every person on this ship. So there's at least that solidarity.
Yeah, and then I think at this point it kind of comes to a head. a
Yeah.
little bit, where it's
After the flogging.
Captain Jack kind of understands where the crew's coming from. He understands the superstition, and he's like, oh, okay, and he starts leaning into the superstition and kind of lets it happen
A little bit. Like,
Yeah.
And then,
well, because he even says the wind will be back by morning. Like he knows what's going to happen.
well, I don't know if he knew that like Holland was going to kill himself. But
Oh no, he knew that like it was going to
I
get
don't
fulfilled.
think that's
No, he totally alluded to it. He knew that.
I mean, he said that he
Yeah.
thought the wind was going to come back, but you could say that was maybe just because of his like experience or like knowledge or something.
No, he didn't say he thought the wind would be back. He said the wind will be back by morning.
Well, I mean, but yeah, either way, it's
I
because
think
he's
he's
like,
also just being optimistic.
yeah. I mean, I'm sure that's
Yeah, it could have been like a
Yeah, I know. He low-key just encouraged Holland to do what he did.
I
don't
think
know
so.
if that's true, Miles.
I think
what he
so.
was doing, but
I think so.
But we
Like
do
that's
get-
how I read it. Like I read no before it happened. I had read that scene as like him.
Why
Like,
is everything so fucking weird? You you read everything at like the worst. You think every character is like just this huge piece of shit in everything we've ever watched.
That's because they are. Okay, good people aren't interesting. Horrible people are. So you got to write horrible people, right?
good
Keeps
people
coming
can
back
be
to
very
our-
interesting if they're put into tough positions.
Keeps coming
But-
back to our Steve Jobs review.
Okay, so we see like a really creepy scene when Mr. Hollum like enters the lower decks and every man
I
is like,
fucking hated this dude.
like saluting him. They're just like slowly surrounding him, causing Mr. Hollum to have like a panic attack. And that's when I think the doctor sees him and everyone's like, yeah, man, this guy may not be cut out for this. Like, he's like, how old are you? Like, you're like 26, right? Maybe 27. He's like, oh, I'm like 31. And he's like, oh shit. Like, he's like, you're still doing that? Like, oh man. But whatever. Mr. Hollum then says goodbyes, commits suicide, and then we get the funeral scene. And I do kind of like that the chef hands him the book, and in it, it's the page of Jonah.
Miles's cat is hungry again.
I apologize for this. We started recording later than I thought we would.
Why don't you ever feed your cat, dude?
Because they eat at a very specific time. Otherwise, they would annoy me all day for food. They need to know.
You're the Captain Jack of this household.
Exactly, yeah.
Please don't flog your cat.
I would never flog my cat, ever.
I don't know if we could talk about animal abuse.
Yeah. I'm very anti-animal abuse. If anybody
that's
abuses
good.
your animals,
That's bad.
just don't listen to this podcast. We
Hot
don't want
take.
your business.
That's
Yeah.
a bit controversial, don't you
Whoa.
think? Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't hurt your animals.
Yeah, don't hurt your animals. It's a controversial take, apparently.
So after the funeral, that's when the winds come back. After I think that Jack kind of apologizes too. He's like, look, maybe we could have been nicer to this guy. Maybe we could have done more to make this guy feel more welcome or something. Sorry. And then it starts to the rain picks up, or the winds pick up, and it starts to rain, and they celebrate. And then not too long afterwards, they spot the Acheron, and they decide to chase it. But right before then, the doctor gets shot. As they're there's a hunting accident. They're trying to shoot a bird. The soldier guy, the head
It's
marine
Dick
guy.
Cheney'd.
Yeah, he does.
Wait, which one of you? Okay, so Ron and I watched this separately from Blake and Jason, and I made the Dick Cheney joke. Did one of you guys make it while you were
This is the
watching?
first
Not
Dick
while
Cheney
watching it,
joke
no.
I've heard.
Okay,
But
it's
it's a good one.
yeah.
So
I will say real quick,
yeah.
all the other dude did was bump into an officer. This dude shoots the
Yeah.
fucking surgeon.
He
Yeah.
doesn't get
And
punished.
all he has to do is be like, sorry, dog. I was trying to kill a fucking albatross.
It was an accident, but it was a really
You can't do
easy
that.
accident.
Yeah.
Stupid
And
decision.
if it had been anybody else who got shot, I would be like, okay, it was an act, but it was the fucking
You're killing
doctor.
such an
That's
important
yeah,
part.
a
No one
very
seemed to
important
care.
one.
They were just like, it's all right, bud. Accidents happen.
I do like the scene. They're like, what the other I guess intern doctor who's just there, and he's like, do you think you can pull out the bullet and everything? And he's like, I have to look over his books and kind of study some pictures. Captain's like, study some pictures, oh fuck. He's like, and then later Pippin goes to him and he's like, goodbye, doctor. He's like, oh, fuck. He's like, oh, great, I'm going to die. And then that's where we get Jack having to make the choice of either going after the Acheron again, or like you being hot on his tail, or deciding to save his friend, which he does. They go on to the island. They're finally on the Galapagos Islands, and where the doctor then performs surgery on himself, which is
using a mirror.
Yeah, which I assume is hard, you know?
Yeah.
I've
I
never
could do it.
performed surgery. I've never, least of all on myself, but I can't imagine it being easy. you
It's
know?
like a scene in Lost. Yeah,
Oh, it is.
because he's with the mirror as well.
Yeah.
Everything goes back to Lost.
Because everything does go back to Lost. Jack gives himself. He takes out his like appendix or something. He
does.
with the mirror.
I'm sure. That seems way more realistic, right? To just to remove an organ.
Yeah. Man, did this movie just like steal from everything? It stole from Lost. It stole from Pirates of the Caribbean being about
Yeah,
ships.
Captain Jack.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, come on.
Interesting.
It stole from Starship Troopers, apparently.
It stole from Dick Cheney's life.
Okay, so then we get to see the men kind of like enjoying themselves being on land. They're running around. They're playing like soccer and shit. We see the doctor and his crew like collecting specimens and studying things all across the island. And then he decides, you know what, I'm going to find that flightless bird. Was it like a corbray or something?
Was that like a fucking dodo bird?
I don't know. It kind of looks like a dodo, but I don't
Yeah.
believe it is.
And it jumps off the cliff and like kills itself. And isn't that what
Does it do
dodo
that?
birds did?
No, it didn't do that.
Wait, I didn't realize that's what
I don't
happened.
think he killed himself.
Well, because
I
it was
don't think
up
so.
there, and then he like went up there, and he's on top of a cliff, and it's gone. Right?
I mean, maybe it jumped in the water or something.
I thought the bird killed itself.
What are they trying to say? What's Peter Weir trying to tell us by this?
Birds are stupid.
Birds are no good. Look, they lead to doctors getting shot and then naval engagements. Because that's when we see the doctor, he lands, he hikes up to see the bird, and then, oh, boom, there it is, the Acheron, right in the bay, right where they would want it. And they're like, okay, shit. But also the beetle lands on him, which the beetle, you could say, would not have been found because he tells him like it wouldn't have been found if you spent the whole day on the island. But the Acheron would not have been found if they didn't spend the whole day on the island.
Oh my god.
So it's like, wow. Full circle, fellas.
Well, and you can kind of see in the doctor's mind, there's the tug between, hey, I'm the only one who saw this. Like, I don't really have to tell anybody about this,
Yeah.
but I probably should.
No, I like it because it's like you see both men kind of
Yeah, and you see
giving
that
up their
conflict.
passions,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They're sacrificing their passions for their friends.
They are kind of like a married couple.
They really
Yeah.
are. It's all about sacrifices, folks. Compromising.
That's
It's the nature
actually
of
a-
relationships.
It's just a compromise, not collaborate, not compromise.
What? Oh, well, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Common misconception.
I
Okay.
don't know.
Conflict. That's the real essence of relationship.
Yeah.
Okay. So then as they go back, he tells them about it. They run. They release all of his specimens, which is very sad. It's like, oh, man. But I guess it's better than them just leaving him in the cages to die.
I mean, like, I understand, we need to make haste to go back. I would have sent the little kid, like, ahead to go inform them, hey, prepare to leave, and then caught up to the little kid. And then not had to worry about running back necessarily, and been able to haul all the specimens back. I don't know.
True. Maybe they would just have been too delayed or something if they had to wait for, all the stuff to get back or something. Who knows?
Yeah,
But-
the other ship, what's it called? The Acheron?
Yeah.
It was also a much faster ship than theirs. So like every second counted.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, they still had to like prepare to leave the island. Like they had unloaded a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So we eventually they get back, and then Jack is inspired by the stick bug to use camouflage. He's like, what? The whaling ship vessels? What? So then bring him close and spring the trap. And he was like, yeah, well, this is how we'll catch the predator or something. And I like that Steven's like, you realize you're the predator, actually. And he's like, likes it. Just kind of enjoys it. After that, he tells everybody, no sirs, no salutes. Everybody has to act like, this is a whaling ship, very disorganized. I feel kind of like feeding into the idea of like, bending the rules is okay sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we don't have to just whip everybody, for breaking a rule. maybe, I don't know. And then at like the line, which I love, where he's like, the ship is home, this ship is England. Just kind of the microcosm here.
That's a great fucking speech. It's super good.
And they have surprise on their side. And then we get the big battle, which is awesome. I love it. It's just ferocious. You get everything you kind of want in like a naval battle where, they're blasting cannons at each other. They're sword fighting and everything and shooting muskets and shit. It's awesome. Very engaging, very fun, and sad at the end when we realize the cost.
The Acheron like totally falls for the trick.
Yeah.
Like they come up close. They're basically just coming to board without taking any hostile action.
Yeah, they didn't even have their guns ready. They're just like hubris. It was just like, these guys don't have shit on us.
Yeah. And that's the thing is because, they've been like basically sleepwalking this whole time because they've, no one else has been able to harm them at all. Like, why would they be, should they be scared of these dudes,
Mm-hmm.
Even if it is something else, like, well, they can't hurt us, right? And they wouldn't have if they didn't figure out the strategy of taking out the big center mast, which I like how he even says that. He's like, look, even if we do that, it's disabled, but it's still very dangerous. It's like a wounded animal. So we got to like move very fast. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Great sword fights. I don't know. The whole scene is so good.
It's great, especially when the guys on the Acheron, after they've engaged, they kind of have it locked in. The two ships are basically locked to each other, and they've got people sending over, and they're looking over all this carnage of all these dead people. I'm saying that with the air quotes. And then, everybody's on, they kind of let their guard down because they're like, oh, it's like, oh, we were more successful than we thought we were going to be. And then everybody pops to life and they're like, oh shit, we're back in the battle again.
Yeah.
I thought that was a great moment.
Yeah, they kind of like pull the same shit that they just did.
Yeah. Well,
Uno reverse card.
yeah,
like you,
there's
Jack.
a lot of trickery.
Call an ambulance, but not for me.
And then he even says, I think early on, he's like, oh, you're putting this like the midshipman in charge of like releasing the confined whalers. And he was like, he may turn the tide. Who knows? And he does. He's able to release them. And then like suddenly they've got like 30 extra guys, but at the cost.
Who are really pissed off.
Yeah. They're just handing him tons of guns and shit, but it's at the cost of his life. You see Mr. I forget his name, but that kid dies at the end of the battle. And I like the aftermath too, because he goes, it's a bit on the nose, but when he goes back into like the captain's quarters and he sees that he also played music and everything to like pass the time, and you just imagine it's like, yeah, they are parallels of each other.
Yeah, and then when he goes down to the doctor and sees the captain lying on the table, and it turns out that the captain died and the doctor survived in this ship. And it maybe hints towards his future, not necessarily, but potentially, right? Where it's like on the path that he's on versus the path that Steven's on. And then that kind of sets up for the later conversation that happens.
Yeah. And then, not long after that, after like, basically all the water's stilled, it kind of settles back into routine. Everyone's kind of back in their respective ships. He sends his buddy off on his his first mate off in his first command. He gets the Acheron to take for himself, but then they find out they pulled another sneaky on him, where actually the captain is alive and the doctor was dead. So it's really, the captain is probably going to lead some kind of mutiny or something. He's going to figure out a way to like overturn. So they're like, okay, back at it. We got to go back and chase the ship again.
Which I think was just real interesting, because that then flips, what he expected before, where the captain died and the doctor survived, right?
Yeah.
And then that kind of flips it on its head, where it's like, okay, so whose position is right? Is the captain and his views correct, or is the doctor and his views correct? And it leaves that open to interpretation towards the end.
Yeah, maybe it's what'd you say, Blake? It was like not compromise, but like
Collaboration.
collaboration.
Yeah.
And that's also signified in the fact that they're playing music together at the end, right?
Yeah. Which I love those scenes. They're just like dum, dum,
They're
dum.
just jamming, dude.
Yeah, they're just jamming. Which is apparently a thing when they were like shooting this. Is they had like a clubhouse for the whole crew, but they would all hang out together. They had played rugby together, like on a team against like the French like crew, the cast that was playing the Acheron. They would play it against each other, and they had like a band where they would all just like play music and jam if they wanted to. The only thing they weren't allowed to watch TV, just so they kind of all had to like hang out together. And
Okay.
stuff.
That's
Very
cool.
interesting. Well, yeah. So there it is. That's Master and Commander. What do you guys think? Any more thoughts? I mean, they could have done so many more movies about this too. That was a big thing because this is based off like there's over 20 books, or there's 20 books completed in the series, and there's one unfinished apparently. But
Are they like historical fiction, or are they like based on actual
historical
events?
fiction.
Okay.
So Patrick O'Brien is like a big naval nerd, I guess. And he wrote like a shitload of books from 1969 to 2004 about all these, and I think this one is a mix of one of the books, which is Master and Commander, and the other one, which is Far Side of the World. And they kind of put them together to make this movie.
So my thought, so you showed me a TV show called The Terror, right?
Yes.
A couple months or like a month ago.
Yeah.
And I haven't finished the series yet, but I've watched a couple episodes, and I really like the way that worked with it being a TV show. And I feel like potentially this might have worked better as a high budget TV show. And if they were to remake it as a high budget TV show, I think it would perform better.
Well, you're in luck because that's actually what they're trying to do, apparently.
Oh, really?
my
Oh.
So this is actually one of the few movies that Russell Crowe, because Russell Crowe's like not a sequel kind of guy, but
Yeah.
like he was pushing for a sequel for this movie for a long time. And he like brought it up like recently in like 2015 or something. He was like, hey, we might do a sequel, but it just kind of never happened. But recently they mentioned that they might try to do a series on this. I don't remember which streaming service it'll be on, but they want to make it into a series. But Russell Crowe probably won't be involved because he's obviously aged out at this point. But they're thinking it would be like a prequel series to when like Steven and Jack first meet, and then it would kind of move from there. So it's
Okay.
totally possible they could do it into a thing. But
Hell yeah.
I didn't know that.
personally, though, yeah, I think they could have done this into a show, but it's just such like a well-made movie in my opinion, and this particular story is perfect for a movie. I think it's just a very simple idea of like, they're trying to go after the ship, and like the adventures and stuff they kind of go along the way are important, but to stretch that out into a show, it might get a little bloated. Like I think the other stuff, maybe when they get into the other books and everything, I'm interested to see how that would turn out. But with this particular like story, I think it works really well as a movie.
Mm-hmm.
Just me.
Okay. Any other thoughts, guys?
I think overall, like, it's really good. I just, maybe not for me. It was really good. I'm glad I watched it once. I will probably never watch it again. The cinematography was the highlight, and the set dressing. Obviously, that ship looked really, really good. It was very, very impressive filmmaking, but this just isn't my cup of tea.
I will say, this is before the days when they got really bad at balancing sound levels. So the sound is very good. Like even during the battles, like the sounds don't seem too big or too loud, and you can actually make out what people are saying, which is nice. Yeah. Modern films seem to have forgotten how to...
There's good sound editing. You just have to like...
Yeah.
Modern films have forgotten how to do good sound editing.
Okay.
I don't know if that's true. There's some good sound editing.
Nolan has forgotten.
Nolan's forgotten.
Yeah, but Nolan's like the gold standard nowadays that
No,
everybody's
he's
trying
not.
to trace. No,
Who the fuck says that?
I've seen so many films that have taken inspiration from Nolan's sound design, and I absolutely hate it. And you hear people talking about sound design, and they're like, oh yeah, well, you got to make it atmospheric. In real life, you wouldn't be able to hear them talking, and that's why it's like it makes sense. I think it's really dumb. This movie didn't have that issue, but yeah, modern sound design sucks.
I think
It
that's
can
generalizing.
Suck. It can
but
suck. I I do think they do a little too much sometimes.
At least action movies. Modern sound design in action movies specifically. Non-action movies, it's not as bad.
Depends on the movie. If you're talking about something like Mad Max Fury Road, which has incredible sound design, right?
I never watched the first one, so I didn't watch that one. Sorry.
You don't really need to.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
just watch them.
You
Yeah.
can just watch Mad
They're
Max
almost
Fury
like
Road.
anthology films.
Okay.
Yeah.
Watch Fury Road,
Furiosa.
man. It's incredible. We should talk about that.
Absolutely, but I want to wait till there's like a showing, like at a movie theater or something, because that movie's
Yeah, that's
fucking-
that's another one. I would love to
It's like it
watch
doesn't
again in the theater.
do it any kind of justice to watch it like on your TV unless you have like a fucking major home theater system. But even then, it's still a fantastic movie. But yeah, either way, much like this movie, in my opinion.
Okay.
Anybody else have thoughts?
Yeah, I liked it as well. I would like to watch it again, either if it comes to theaters again, or I would just like to watch it on, on my monitor. I have a really nice monitor with like a really nice set of headphones, so I could get like all of those sounds. I just want to like experience all of it because it is one of those that we just said. It just feels like you're missing out on something if you're just watching it on a basic, TV. Even if it's like a 4K TV, you're probably just not getting everything you probably should out of the movie.
Why is the gladiator so mean to Vision?
But I definitely enjoyed it. I think my favorite aspects of the movie are just like seeing the day-to-day and how the ship like runs, because it's really like the people are the engine and they are the ones that make it go and fix it and like do all these. It's just incredible how everyone just almost immediately, whenever something's happening, know exactly what to do, and they do it like perfectly. That is what I really liked. Also, it's very pretty.
I have a nitpick. I hate the title of the movie, Master and Commander: The Far Side of the World. I don't know. It's just like
Honestly, that's probably why I never watched it to
it's
begin
got
with.
such an awful name.
Like,
You could do one or the other, but not both. I don't know. It's just like a.
I mean, that's fair enough. I feel like probably just Master and Commander would have sufficed.
I think I would like the Far Side of the World. That's like a ooh. What's
I mean,
that?
you get kind of both, right? Because you feel like, okay, it's the idea is going to be, it's a Navy thing. I don't know, but then the Far Side of the World, it does add a sense of exoticism to it.
it's like if they had called Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End. Like,
Or
that would be an
something
awful
stupid
name.
like that.
Yeah.
Who would win in a fight, Jack Sparrow or Captain Jack?
Jack Sparrow would have won,
Aubrey.
but just because like he would have like not lost. Like I don't feel like Captain Aubrey would have been able to do anything to him.
Because
Yeah.
Jack Sparrow is like Saitama from One Punch Man,
Yeah.
where it's like he just, by the laws of the universe, he's not allowed to lose.
Yeah,
So-
even when he loses, he
he's
wins.
like The Rock.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's not allowed to lose. So it's like defies logic or any reasonable.
I mean, I feel like in the
expectation.
first movie, maybe the sequels kind of ruined this. I feel like in the first movie, he very strategically fails upwards, though.
Yeah,
Right? Like that's kind of his. He's like a miracle maker. He kind of just makes everything work.
well, that's like the huge problem with like the
sequels.
The sequels. Yeah, it's like the first one is great.
It's much
and
tighter.
Yeah, everyone was like, "Wow, we just sure love Johnny Depp as Jack Sparrow," and they're like, "Oh yeah, bet." And they just like, and it just became
They went
fucking
nuts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Jack Sparrow of the movies, and I was like, okay, and it gets exhausting, man.
'Cause
After a while,
he feels more like a Han Solo type character
Yeah,
in the first movie.
yeah,
And
He
then
feels better as a side character.
he's paprika. You sprinkle it on there, and it's great. But then it's like if you're just drowning it in, it's horrible.
nobody just eats paprika.
I think it's funny that we're talking more about Pirates of the Caribbean during this episode
We
than
just
the
talked
one.
for an hour and
Yeah.
15 minutes.
No, but we're talking more about it in this episode than the episode where we talked about the movie by the same director.
Okay.
yeah.
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 Well, it's funny enough, this movie
more
does have
relevant.
a relation to pirates for me anyway, because I didn't watch this movie when it first came out, but it was after the Pirates of the Caribbean. I think Curse of the Black Pearl had come out. I was probably I want to say like 10 years old. I can't remember exactly. But I went to a sleepover at a friend's house. It was like his birthday party. And we were like, hey, let's go rent a movie. It's like, okay, so someone picks out like Bride of Chucky or something. And then like we decided and I was like, ooh, Master and Commander. That looks fun. but for a bunch of 10-year-olds, it is very much not fun.
Yeah.
It's a great movie. But I remember that was the first time I watched it, and I was like, this is cool. Like, especially the first opening sequence, but after, when it's just like more of the politics on the ship and you see kind of like the infighting and everything, everyone was kind of just looking at me like, why are we watching this? And be like, all right, let's just watch, Chucky or whatever.
I'd much rather watch The Bride of Chucky.
And I was gonna say, and I felt a very similar vibe watching this with Miles when it was over. Miles first, he stood up, looked at me, he said 3 out of 10, and then walked out. So it was a very similar vibe.
Hey,
like, I'm a 10-year-old again.
I did not say 3 out of 10. I said 2.5. All I said was 2.5, and then
It's good. It's just it's like a really dense fucking. It's like reading a textbook. It's kind of. Maybe I'm small brained, but I don't know. I'm too ADHD for it.
It's not for everybody.
Yeah.
I'll accept that, and it's it's much like Mysterious Skin. I'm just kidding.
That's fair. That's fair.
I will say
Very similar movies.
Very similar movies.
my timing on watching this movie did kind of suck because it was the middle of my work week, and I was watching it like during the period of time when I would be usually like getting ready to go to sleep. And I like, part of me in the back of my mind, I was like, dude, like I need to be able to wake up tomorrow morning. Like, yeah,
It's okay. It's fine. It's not everyone's cup of tea. This was my pick because it's something that I very much enjoy. And I'm excited. This is why I like this, because we get to show each other movies that I'm sure,
Exactly.
Blake, you probably wouldn't have watched this movie without me making you.
I never would have watched this movie.
Exactly. But now you did, and you'll get a reference now when I say it every now and then. So.
yeah, I can't wait to show you guys some of my picks.
Okay, so should we move on to?
Oh, well, what's your final thoughts on it?
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? Honestly, it was better the next day. Like, if that makes sense. Like, when I thought about it more the next day, I was like, yeah, it's actually a pretty good movie. Very heavily character driven, and I tend to like that a lot. And I was expecting it to lean more into being an action movie, but really, like, even though there is a lot of action, it's not an action movie.
Yeah,
In my opinion, it's very much a character story driven movie.
I mean, there's really only 2, like maybe 3, like action sequences, right? There's like the opening battle, when they're going around the horn, and then the final engagement, and that's pretty much it. The rest of it is just like you're seeing kind of day in the life of like the ship, what it's like to at this point in time, and and what it really takes, to keep it alive and everything. Which, I think you said it beautifully, Jason. Like, it's the heart of the people. It's very fascinating in that way.
Yeah, I'll rewatch this in 20 years.
If it ever comes back to theaters, let me know, and I will go with you and watch it.
You're not dad enough yet. You got to get that
This
dad.
does, I was
Yeah.
gonna say
This is a
feels-
dad film.
This does feel like some shit you would like walk into a dad watching. Oh, it's pretty good. Like on their fucking drinking a beer at 2 p.m. Like watching movies on the Sci-Fi Channel.
It's on TNT, and you got to be watching it on a Saturday morning.
Does anybody watch anything this week? I really haven't.
I
No.
watched Nicolas Cage's masterpiece, National Treasure.
Did you really?
Oh,
Not that you didn't tell me you were watching that, because I would have watched all of it with you. You were halfway through. You were halfway through the movie when
I'm
came
sorry.
in here.
I guess I invited Ron and Rosie to watch it with me. I didn't invite you. I'm sorry about that.
It's okay.
I don't know why. I just saw it. I was watching Parks and Rec, and they mentioned National Treasure, and I was like, man, I have not seen that movie in a long time. I wonder if it still holds up, like, to being as bad as I thought it was, and it did. it met my expectations. The writing was awful.
No.
There was some cool sequences, I guess, but like I don't know.
That's the definition of like
Yeah.
a popcorn flick.
Oh yeah,
right.
it was
I love that
enjoyable. I mean, but like the dialogue was just really bad.
Yeah, and I love Diane Kruger. That's her name, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes her accent bleeds through quite heavily in that movie. But it's fun. I love National Treasure. Is Sean Bean in the first or the second one?
He's in that one. He's
Okay.
he's the bad guy. Sorry. Wait, what were you gonna say? Well, actually, no, I'm just kidding.
I've been trying to get this. You guys are gonna laugh because I've been trying to like say this for like 5 minutes and it literally doesn't matter. But when I watched that movie for the first time, that was also the first time I had thin crust pizza. So fun fact.
Okay.
Which I don't really like, so it was one of the last times I had thin crust pizza.
Thin crust pizza is fantastic.
Thin crust pizza
I'm gonna
sucks.
make sure
I mean,
to
like
order
the
thin crust pizza for you
like
every single time.
Like the cracker thin crust. You know what I'm talking
Like
about?
the
Like a
Domino's.
Domino's.
Yeah,
thing,
yeah,
Yeah.
like that.
Where it's kind of like a
like
baked tortilla.
So not like New York style.
No. I
thing.
like New York style, but like
Okay.
thin crust. That shit sucks.
That is like that's like a snack, but I don't really feel like oh, we're getting pizza. It's like cool. And if you give me thin crust, be like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
See, no, but the thing is, like, if I get a Domino's thin crust pizza, I'm eating that whole pizza.
Oh yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you know. It's,
And like I used to deliver for Domino's, and delivering those pizzas were such a pain in the ass because you cut them and it's like a cracker, and so like and it just slides around, and multiple people, like I'd hand them the pizza, and it's not like I did anything wrong. I just fucking drove there, but like the pizza would be all over the place in the box, and they'd be like, "I'm not eating this." I'm like, "That's fair. I'll take it back." But yeah, fuck that type of pizza.
Yeah.
Domino's. Stop it.
it's how you drive. It really is.
I
know,
drive perfectly fine.
Maniac.
I'm a good driver.
No, there's a method to how to deliver pizzas so that the contents don't go everywhere.
I
Like,
get it. Trust me. Everyone has this problem. If you deliver for Domino's, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Look, I have trained people on how to properly deliver pizzas to
But
avoid
not
this
these
happening.
fucking like paper thin wafer cracker fucking.
I'm sorry,
pizzas.
Miles. I have delivered pizzas I did it for like 9 years. Okay.
I just realized that all three of you guys have like
Yeah, we
pizza
have a lot of pizza
experience.
experience on this
I'm the only
podcast.
one. Yeah, I never actually worked in the food industry. So yeah.
Must be so
Lucky
nice.
you.
Must
Yeah.
be nice.
Hey, look.
That's
mean,
why I
I've-
can
I've
still
done-
see like joy in your eyes.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
hasn't
for
been
real.
beaten out of you yet.
Yeah. Hey, I worked retail. Okay, that wasn't great.
That's
it's
yeah,
not as
that's
bad as food though. I
almost
think
as bad.
that's I from what I understand, yeah, food industry shit is terrible.
A lot of pizza experience on this podcast.
Yeah. we should review a pizza movie at some point. Are there
Was there a pizza?
30 minutes or less.
Yeah, 30 minutes. Or less.
Mystic Pizza?
Does do the
that's
right
like-
thing count?
Maybe.
I mean, a large portion.
Spider-Man 2 count?
Pizza time.
You're fired.
Do the Right Thing is kind of a pizza movie, right? I mean, most of it takes place at a pizza parlor.
You know, I haven't seen Do the Right Thing.
It's a good movie.
Yeah.
Has anybody else watched anything this week?
No, still watching the Ant Show.
Still watching BoJack. I'm on the
Yeah.
last season.
Ron's finally to the ant portion of the ant
I
show.
actually am.
Yeah.
I'm at the Ant part, and that's like 4 seasons. No, that's like 5 seasons into the show where I'm like, yeah, here it is. Ants coming in. It's I'm talking about Hunter x Hunter. It's a very good show, but it's like I can't even like talk about it because there's so much shit that goes
Yeah.
into it that it's like I'm like that's a
Should
whole
you explain
podcast.
why we call it the Ant Show?
Well, there are these.
There's ants in
Because
it.
I tried explaining the show to Blake once. I was like, "There's a show. There's some really cool characters and stuff that happens." And then I was like, "But there's like," I was like, "It's kind of weird because like there's these characters like they're giant like talking ants, but they're not really ants." And he was like, "Ants," and like that's how he's fixated on it, essentially.
So this show has just become the Ant Show.
Well,
Yeah.
it's to be fair, it's incredibly hard to explain like a specific aspect of Hunter x Hunter to
Yeah.
somebody without like the whole show. Like the entire like premise that it is based on is so weird and out there that it's
Yeah.
hard to understand unless you watch
And
it.
also like the nature of the show itself, like each arc is like so separate from the other.
Yeah,
where it's
so
like, there is-
different. Yeah.
there is like an overarching thing, but everything kind of is like different. So there's like one season where they're basically in a giant video game, and then the other season where they're like like in a fighting arena. You know, it's like I don't know. It's like so. It's just very different. There's one where they're dealing with the mafia, and like people are trying to kill them, and there's one where there's giant ants. Like it's fucking weird.
And
a
then
great
there's
show.
one where there's just an election going on.
Yeah, it's like there's an
Yeah.
election while also someone is dying in the background.
Yeah.
but yeah, it's a good show, but it's hard to explain to somebody to be like, yeah, it's like unless you watch anime, you're probably not want to.
And the next season, which they haven't come out with yet, but when they do, is going to be on a boat.
yeah.
Hey.
the far side of the world.
It is. Yeah,
Everything
it really
comes
is.
full
Ants on a boat. Anybody else? Jason, you watch things?
I haven't watched any movies.
Oh.
I mean, we watched the first 3 episodes of The Leftovers.
Yeah, but I kind of want to
yeah.
like save. I think I want to talk about that on the podcast eventually, like in its entirety.
Okay.
Oh,
It's a good
explain
show.
The Leftovers. No, I'm just kidding.
It's a great show. It's one of my favorites.
It's really good.
All right, Jason, I guess it's your pick next week for some reason. Unless Miles, you want another pick. I'm just kidding.
Thanks, man.
I'm just kidding.
Just pass up Jason. Like, that's so nice of you.
I'd give it to Ron, but he made me watch this boring historical movie. Jason, what's your key November pick?
I am going to go with The Graduate.
Ah, good movie.
Okay, good.
That's interesting. To be fair, that's like one of my favorite movies of all time.
can't wait
I've
to
only
see it
seen it
again.
once, and I figure, fuck it.
It-
I'm
only
going to
seen
watch
that
it again.
once?
Yeah,
It's been
I've
a
only
long
seen it once.
time. I remember it being good, so I hope that.
I own the criteria.
Same. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
I am too. Well, thank you very much. I guess we'll see you next week for The Graduate.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Good night.